The year is 878. The land that will one day be called England lies in ruin. Viking longships carve across its rivers, towns burn, and kings fall one by one. And somewhere in the marshes of Somerset, cold, hungry, and hunted, a fugitive king named Alfred hides among peasants. Yet from this swamp, from the lowest point in his life, he will rise. He will reclaim his kingdom, defeat the invaders, and plant an idea so powerful it will outlast him, an idea called England. This is not just the story of a king. It's the story of how a man's vision shaped a nation that did not yet exist. The Fractured Isles. Before Alfred's rise, the British Isles were a patchwork of kingdoms. Northumbria, Mercia, East Anglia, and Wessex, each ruled by its own king, each fighting for its own survival. There was no England, only chaos. Then came the storm from the north. For decades, Viking raiders had struck the coasts, burning monasteries, looting treasures, and vanishing into the sea. But by the mid-9th century, the raids turned into conquest. They came not just for gold, but for land. The great heathen army, led by men like Ivar the Boneless and Halfdan Ragnarsson, swept across the island. One by one, the ancient kingdoms fell. Northumbria, crushed. East Anglia, destroyed. Mercia, overrun. Only one kingdom still stood, Wessex, ruled by the house of Ethelwulf. And among its royal sons was a boy who would one day be called Alfred the Great, the Prince of Wessex. Alfred was not born to rule. He was the youngest of 5 brothers, destined for the church, not the throne. But fate has a strange way of rewriting destinies. As his brothers died, some in battle, others of illness, the crown of Wessex fell to Alfred. And with it, the impossible task of defending the last free kingdom in England. By the time Alfred became king in 871, the Vikings were already at his door. Their armies were vast, their warriors relentless, their gods fierce. At first, Alfred fought bravely and lost often. He paid the Vikings tribute, hoping to buy peace, but peace never lasted. By 878, the storm returned stronger than ever. The Danes launched a surprise attack during the winter, and Alfred was driven into hiding. His court scattered, his kingdom gone. For the first time, Wessex, and all of Anglo-Saxon England, seemed lost. The man in the marshes. And yet, history often turns not in palaces, but in exile. In the marshlands of Athelney, Alfred found refuge among commoners. He disguised himself, blending in with shepherds and farmers who didn't know their king was living among them. There's a legend, maybe true, maybe not, that one day a peasant woman asked him to watch her loaves baking while she went out. Lost in thought, planning how to retake his kingdom, Alfred let them burn. When she returned, furious, she scolded him, not knowing she was shouting at her king. But Alfred did not correct her. He took her anger with humility. That story, real or not, became symbolic, because from those burnt loaves, from those lonely marshes, Alfred's rebirth began. It was there he built a hidden fortress, gathered loyal warriors, and began striking back, slowly, patiently, until finally the moment came. The Battle of Edington. In May 878, Alfred's army marched out to face the Viking leader Guthrum. They met at Edington, in Wiltshire, the last stand for Anglo-Saxon England. The battle was brutal and close. Spear clashed against shield, men screamed, and the earth ran red with blood. But this time, Alfred did not break. He rallied his men with the cry of a cause greater than survival, a vision of unity, of faith, of freedom from the invader. By day's end, Guthrum's forces broke and fled. The Vikings, undefeated for a generation, had been beaten. Alfred surrounded them, cutting off their escape. Guthrum, realizing defeat, surrendered. But here is where Alfred's greatness truly begins, not in victory, but in what he chose to do next. Instead of slaughtering the Danes, he offered them peace. He baptized Guthrum, made him a Christian godfather, and signed a treaty, dividing the land between Wessex and what became known as the Danelaw. It was a peace born not from fear, but from wisdom. For Alfred understood, if England was to survive, it could not be built on endless war, it had to be built on order. The rebuilding of a kingdom, victory, was only the beginning. After Edington, Alfred set out to rebuild Wessex, not as it was, but as something new. He reorganized the army, creating a system of fortified towns, or burhs, across his kingdom. These were not just military outposts, they were the seeds of cities: Winchester, Oxford, Exeter. He reformed the navy, building ships larger and faster than the Viking longboats. For the first time, England had a fleet. But Alfred's genius went beyond war. He understood that a nation is not held together by walls and swords, but by culture. He promoted education, insisting that even nobles learn to read. He brought scholars from across Europe, translating great works into Old English so his people could learn from them. In an age of blood and chaos, Alfred lit a candle of knowledge. He once wrote, "A king must have wisdom. Without it, his reign will fail." Those were not the words of a warlord, but of a philosopher king. The birth of an idea. By uniting Wessex under law, language, and learning, Alfred forged something far more enduring than a victory. He forged identity. Before Alfred, people spoke of themselves as West Saxons, Mercians, or Anglians, not as English. After Alfred, that began to change. Through his rule, his reforms, and his writings, he gave his people a shared story, a vision of one land, one culture, one destiny. He was not just saving his kingdom, he was shaping England before the word even existed. When later kings, his descendants, united the island, they were fulfilling a dream that Alfred had begun in the marshes of Somerset, the dream that a fractured land could become one people. Legacy of the Great King. Alfred ruled for nearly 30 years, a lifetime of struggle, faith, and vision. When he died in 899, England was still divided, still threatened by the North. But the foundation had been laid. His descendants, men like Edward the Elder and Ethelstan, would go on to complete what he started, uniting the English under one crown. Centuries later, when writers and kings looked back for the first true English monarch, they did not choose a conqueror. They chose Alfred. He became the only English ruler ever to be called the Great. Not for his victories alone, but for his mind. His belief that power meant responsibility, that kingship was not domination, but stewardship. Even the Normans who invaded 2 centuries later revered him. To them, he was not a relic, but a blueprint for what a king could be. The echo through time. If you trace the story of England, from the Magna Carta to the modern nation, you find Alfred's fingerprints everywhere, in the idea of law, in the defense of learning, in the belief that even a broken land can be made whole. He lived in a world of axes and faith, but he dreamed of something timeless. A realm where people belonged not just to a ruler, but to a shared destiny. That dream endures through centuries of war, empire, and revolution, because it was never about one man. It was about an idea. The idea that from ruin, something greater can rise, that wisdom can outlast power, that a single vision, born in exile, kindled by hope, can define a civilization. A final reflection. History often remembers conquerors, men who destroy, who take. But Alfred the Great was something rarer, a man who built. He took a shattered people, a land broken by invasion, and through patience, intellect, and faith, forged the foundations of a nation. When we speak of England, we are speaking of his creation, not of borders and armies, but of an identity, a shared story. And perhaps that is his truest victory. Because while the empires of his enemies faded into dust, the idea Alfred forged still lives, in every language spoken, every law written, and every moment the English spirit endures. So the next time you hear the name Alfred the Great, remember, he was not simply a warrior or a ruler. He was the dreamer in the marshes, the scholar with a sword, the architect of a nation that did not yet exist. And through him, we learn that greatness is not born from conquest, but from vision. A vision powerful enough to shape the very idea of England. If you found this story fascinating, like, share, and subscribe to Timeless Questions channel, where we explore the civilizations, ideas, and mysteries that shaped humanity.